Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm The Geoff.
And it's time for our final entry in the Harry Potter discussion series. Today we're going to take care of Harry Potter and...
The Seven.
Of Harry Potter and...
Which is movie number Deathly Hallows.
Okay, alright. And we decided to go ahead and do Deathly Hallows as one video, even though it was two movies. Because, I mean, let's face it, it's really one 4.5 hour movie. So
distributed in 2 bites for easy shipping.
So starting right off, thank God this was split up.
Yes. There's no way all of what that really needs could have fit into one film. And I'm not even sure they got everything they needed into 2.
Oh, I'm sure given your track record so far, you're gonna have a number of things that you wish were there that weren't. But I don't see how in a million years you could have made this one movie.
Yeah. So much glossing over would have had to have been done. And 2, one of the burdens that the last book in a series like this carries, book or movie, is tying up the plot threads that have been left and planted and left hanging all the way along. I mean, after 6 books, each of which leaves mysteries and head-scratchers lying on the table, you've got to deal with them. Or you leave the reader and the audience just very frustrated indeed, and then you go work for Studio Gainax. And there is so much to deal with there that this book had a heavy burden on its plate, and the movie likewise, for the same reason.
I was surprised, despite the number of characters that, as we've been watching this, you would tell me, well, that person was important in this book, but they don't show up until this movie, or somebody like Dobby the House Elf, who shows up in 3 and then doesn't show up again until 7. But 2? 2, but not until movie 3, which is what I'm talking about. He's in 2?
He's in 2.
Oh yeah, he is in 2. I'm sorry, my brain. Yes, he is 2. Well, we just watched 8 of these. But you got something like that who's then in 3 more movies or 3 more books, but not the movies. And you said it was kind of important. But even despite all that, I was kind of impressed with the number of things that they still were able to at least use as plants from the previous films. They did a pretty decent job, I thought, especially in the second half of this. When they started using a little bit of flashbacks of things, showing you these were the plants, and a lot of the major stuff did happen to make it in, and I think that some of it, they got kind of lucky, because they didn't necessarily know where it was all going, especially in the first couple movies, but things like the Chamber of Secrets coming back, and things like the Goblin from the first movie. That's a character that could have easily been left out in the first movie. I mean, they could have skipped the part where he goes to the bank, and they didn't. And it's good that they didn't. And there's a number of things like that. So it really does feel like a lot of elements from the movies that from the previous movies you've seen coming back and tying back in that you didn't know if you'd ever see again. And I gotta say that I enjoyed this a lot more having just watched the other ones over the last couple weeks while we've been doing this, because when I saw this in the theater, I was pretty lost. It had been a while, and I didn't catch some of those connections again. I mean, like, my brain was somewhat jogged, but it wasn't the fun experience that this was, having just been through it.
Yeah, because all of those callbacks, if it's been so long since you saw those movies, and in the original theater run, that was we're talking about years. And that does not stick in the mind, and you don't pick up as much. And like the books, the movies are very, very interested in that kind of unity and organic connection between all the films across the arc of the series. That's something that Rowling has definitely got a conscience about. He's a very careful author in making sure that things that she does not introduce something in book 1 and then forget about it. But everything that happens in there has its reason to be there and really does plug in to the whole. And it's one of the great things about the books, and probably one of the things about the books that has helped them to be as compelling as they are. Mm-hmm. This series has the fan base it does because its world is so well fleshed out and thought out. and that's a thing that an intelligent reader appreciates.
So we've talked a lot about how these have gotten more, have grown up as they've gone along. That's been a big theme of our discussions, and how they've gotten kind of darker as they've gone along. And wow, does this final, two-part film have a really different tone even than 6 does.
Yes. There is a great deal of pain and a great deal of darkness. And all of the main characters really have their rock bottom in this installment. So one of the reasons that so many people don't enjoy the first part of 7 is because one of the things that is in that part of the story are each of Harry and Ron and Hermione having their own personal rock bottom moment, and it's unpleasant. It's unpleasant to experience, and it's supposed to be, and it has to be, and that is there.
I really think the way the two films were split up, and then watching them, especially watching them together, was done the right way, and that the last, and that the end of the first part was really the best halfway point they could probably find with Voldemort digging up Dumbledore and getting the Elder Wand, which is a really cool, creepy image to end on. The only thing I don't like is that when they were put in the theater, that there were so many months between them. I wish that they had been able to do it in such a way where, and other movies have done this, that are really just one big movie split into two, where it would have been better if it had been like a month as opposed to a few. Yeah. Because to my recollection, it was a few months between these.
It was something like,
I want to say it was like 6 or 8
months is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And I wish they'd been released
in July,
a month away. And I understand from a business standpoint why you wouldn't do that with these, because they're going to make you more money if you let them linger in the theater longer. And so yeah, that's fair. But for my personal enjoyment, just for me personally, for my personal enjoyment, I think I would have enjoyed this as a whole in the theater better if I hadn't had months in between. Because I was in the camp that didn't like the first part of this when I first saw it. I understood why it was done that way. I got why it was necessary. But just, I didn't sit in the theater and have a good time. I left kind of in a slump, And I think that you're meant to.
Because that's where in the story you are.
Yeah, but that's where in the story. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I didn't really leave on this like cliffhanger high of yay. This is I can't wait to see what happens. It was more. I was kind of relieved to be out of the theater at that point.
Yes.
And again, that's not really a slight against the movie so much as just I wish that the second part had somehow come out right after that.
That's the downside of it having to be in 2 parts.
Yeah, and what are you going to do?
If you make the first part satisfying in itself, then the climax happens in the wrong place when you consider them together. If the climax happens in the right place when you consider them together, then the first act and the first half of Act 2 are going to leave you in the dump there.
Before we get real into the movie itself, let me just ask you about the book, because I'm curious to know if, and again, for those of you who haven't been watching this whole time, as I've said before, I've read the first 4 books, but quit and continue watching the movies, but I hadn't read the rest of the books. My question to you is, I've heard a lot of fans who were really disappointed in the 7th book when they read it, and who didn't really like a lot of choices that Rowling made in how the series ended, and I was curious as to what your take was on that when you first read the book.
I was not among those who wanted to write her and say, no, this is how you should have done it. My gosh, yes, sir. I read the book in almost one go.
My goodness. And that one was, what, 900 pages?
Yeah, I was careful not to pick it up and start until I knew I had a couple of days with nothing else I needed to do in them so that I could read, because I was not going to be doing anything else until I finished that thing. And I was right, I didn't. It is, as a book, it pulled me straight along. Some parts harder than others, and some parts faster than others, because there is this kind of slumpy place when the kids are out wandering and have no idea where they're going, and are fighting amongst themselves and are miserable, and that part's miserable. But
I felt like I kind of experienced that in the theater too.
Yeah. Fiction
But at
takes
least
us
it
to places.
At least it was faithful.
Fiction takes us to places that we wouldn't have been in real life. That's fair enough. I was very happy with a lot of the resolutions of things in the 7th book. It would not have upset me if fewer of my favorite people had to die, but I'm not going to argue about it.
Well, so you felt like...
I think Rowling's argument on that is persuasive.
I found myself surprised that more people didn't die.
Well, we see more of that in the book.
Oh, okay.
And that's again because in a book, more of those people have names. More of those people that you just see in one frame in the movie, and then they're getting blasted. When you read that, that was actually somebody. And oh yeah, this was somebody. Going back and looking at the references people have written now about the films, you can see, oh, that was character that, who I didn't even know was in the movies because they were never named, and we saw a person in for 1 second and then they got blasted to pieces. Oh,
and if this was Star Wars, they would all get action figures.
Yes. If this was Star Wars, they would be in the trivia game. By the way, the second alien from the left at 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 15 seconds in movie number 5. But the suffering that the characters experience is very real, and a lot of people are casualties in this war, and in some ways kind of appreciate that, because you see so many of these stories where they're supposedly the war of destiny, of the universe, where ultimate evil and ultimate good are facing off, and in the great big battle, where armies of thousands face each other, and only 3 people die.
Yeah.
Rowling really worked hard not to let that happen, and you gotta respect that, I think.
But again, I kind of expected, because even though a lot of those characters don't get anything to do in the movies still have a pretty decent amount of characters that a pretty
they have
large
more than
cast
I was
of characters.
expecting.
And
so nice.
I was seriously kind of surprised, like I said, not to see more kids that we knew, get killed. It seems like at least from the standpoint of the films, you lose a lot of people that came up later. You remember I mentioned in one of the first couple of videos that we did that it seems like the most important people at the beginning are still the most important people at the end, which is the way it ought to be. But it seems like a lot of the people that end up dying feel, at least to me, like they were kind of expendable in the first place because they weren't around very long. Just from the perspective of the film series, you know what I mean? Didn't mean anything at all to me when Moody died because he gets nothing to do in the movies.
Yeah.
When you see him the first time through a whole movie and you get to really know him, that's not even him in the first place. So then when he gets like 5 minutes in the next 2 movies. So when he dies, who cares? And I guess I felt more about it. I guess I would feel more for Lupin, but.
Yeah. And he is more of a presence in 4 and 5 and 6 than the real Moody ever is. That Moody is another one of those victims of adapting books into movies. In the 4th book, we're introduced to the existence of Moody before we see the false Moody. So we know a little bit about him.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And about the real one.
Yeah, good.
We spend that year with the false one, and then we find out he was the false one. We don't get to talk to the real one again at the end of book 4. However, the real one is very much a presence in book 5 and 6. So then his death in 7, which does happen, means a lot more. Much the same thing is true of Dobby the house elf, who is a real factor in book 4 and in book 5 and in book 6, as well as book 7. And since those intervening movies mainly wrote him clean out of the story, if we haven't read the books, then we remember this this computer effect from movie 2 suddenly shows up in movie 7 and then dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That felt a bit haphazard and rushed to me, especially because one of the major, what's played up as one of the major climactic things at the end of the first part of 7 is that he dies, and I'm like, who cares? He's like, from the perspective of the movies, he's probably the most expendable person.
The movies don't do nearly enough to show us why Dobby's death would be emotionally so important to Harry.
It's also goofy that he just apparates in the middle of that jail, and Harry literally just goes, "Why are you here?" And having seen this once before, I found myself going, well, from a script purpose, so that he can get killed. Because 10 minutes later, that's what happens. I don't know. I don't like that, but anyway.
Yeah, and also, his relationship to Harry is one of so much more importance. The connection Harry has with this fragment of mirror.
Oh yeah.
Which is a fragment of a mirror that Sirius had given him at the end of book 4, if I remember correctly. Or possibly in book 5. I'd have to go back and look. But always back in the... No, it is at the beginning of book 5 that Sirius gives Harry that mirror, because it was one of a two-way set of mirrors that he and James had when they were in school, of talking to each other while they were in detention.
Oh, okay.
And now, after Sirius died, Harry accidentally ended up breaking his mirror, and only that shard of it is left. Its mate had been in Sirius's possession, and after Sirius died, it changed hands in ways that aren't made very explicit, but Aberforth has it at the end. And that's another one of those book things that got written to the side. Harry keeps seeing Aberforth's very blue eyes in his shard of mirror, and at first is confused because all he can see is the eye, and that looks so much like Dumbledore, that Albus Dumbledore, that that's one of the mysteries of book 7. Book 7, what's going on here? Finally, when he meets Aberforth at the end, he realizes that's who I've been looking at. That is who got my "please help me," and then sent Dobby the house elf.
I don't think that's made real explicit in the movie.
It's not clear in the movie.
That storytelling is only you don't know where that mirror came from, and they sort of kind of try to explain it. I think I don't know. Aberforth said something about it, but I couldn't even... I was trying to figure out if maybe the movie was even trying to make the mirror something different than it was in the book. I couldn't really get a handle on it, but and the thing is, I was completely confused because where did the shard of glass come from? What is Harry seeing in it? Is it kind of like his dreams? What is it? And the only information I had to go on was what you were telling me while we were watching it, which was, okay, so that thing you've never seen before? Here's what it is. And I was like, and it's also not just we're not given the background of where it came from, but it's also storytelling that doesn't work on only a visual level, because you can't just show me a pair of eyes and have Harry looking at them, and me deduce from that Harry is thinking these look like Dumbledore. Yeah. You can't do that. There has to be exposition about that. You have to. Yeah, because I personally, as a viewer, didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure I wouldn't have had I not read the books. And there were some compression at the beginning I would like to mention, in order to say that it actually does not bother me. The opening chapters of the book give us a lot about Harry's parting from the Dursley family. And there's actually an interesting scene where Harry and Dudley, his cousin, his evil, bullying cousin, have this little moment of kind of rapprochement, and it's not a huggy sort of scene, but they part as non-enemies.
Did you kind of wish that had been there?
That would have been a nice thing to have in the movie. There's also a moment between Harry and his Aunt Petunia there that, and a little moment that comes earlier where Rowling says Harry at that moment, for the first time, fully appreciated that his Aunt Petunia was his mother's sister, although he couldn't say exactly why. And these little moments of connection between them that, because I think I'd love to see that in there, because that is one of the big things about Harry. Harry has a heart even for these people who have been nothing but horrible to him his entire life.
That's an excellent point. You know, I was missing some of that in the movie, having not even read the book. I'm gonna go this far when. At the very, very final scene when they jump 19 years later, and they show Harry taking his kids to platform 9 3/4. You see in older Draco Malfoy there briefly, and I wanted an exchange. I found myself thinking, is Harry going to walk up and talk to him? We're going to find out that they're probably not like friends, but maybe they're amicable, and I would have liked to have seen them at least say something to each other. And again, I didn't read the book, and I don't know what of that was even in there, but that's not important to me. Just from the experience of watching the movie, I wanted to see more of these relationships actually resolve themselves somewhere. And Draco and Harry was my big one. I was like, where is the resolution to that?
Yeah, because Draco and because Harry
and I don't. By the way, I'm not coming down too hard on the film. I thought a lot of great things were done with it. It's just I did feel like there wasn't enough resolution to some of those relationships.
Yeah, and Harry and Draco, there again, in the room of requirement after Crabbe in the book and Goyle in the movie have unleashed evil magic fiend fire, rather stupidly, and the one who does it in each case actually does get killed by it. Good job. Way to be evil and pay the price. But Harry and the others rescue Malfoy and the other goon, different in the book and the movie, but whatever the other goon is, Harry and the others rescue Malfoy and him out of there and save their lives. In the book, later on in the battling, Harry gets to save Draco's life again. And I think Ron is the one who points out, that's twice we've saved your life today, Malfoy.
Do those two in the book ever have like a definite moment of just like resolving anything? Okay.
But they do see each other on the platform. We do see them exchange looks and a nod on the platform in that postscript chapter.
Maybe all I needed
to suggest that
honestly
they both survived and they both acknowledge each other.
Maybe the problem was that in the film they don't acknowledge each other because it's not shot right. They're not in the same frame together. I mean, you don't even see one past the other one. Literally, unless I'm remembering it wrong, I mean, we just saw it. Literally, the way it looked to me was the camera just cuts for a minute to here's Draco, and then cuts back to Harry. I don't even know if Harry saw him. You know what I mean?
I totally missed that. I wasn't looking.
If they had just passed each other and there had been a glance, that would have been enough for me. But I just wanted something.
Yeah. That would have been a nice touch, but and these things make a point about Harry's character. Harry is kind to people, even people who have been awful to him. Contrasted with Voldemort, who is nasty even to the people who support him. I mean, in this episode alone, look at the number of times Bellatrix, Bonham Carter.
That's her name now.
Slithering up to him, and he shuts her down again and again. Here is this exceptionally creepy and the evilest woman ever to live, and she is head over heels, puppy drooling, lovesick, struck, fawning over Voldemort, and he just ignores her again and again.
And that was handled really well in the film because you see it over and over again. Yeah.
What great acting by by Helena Bonham Lestrange, by the way. Really, her best acting moment, I thought, was when Hermione has drunk the Polyjuice potion to impersonate Bellatrix Lestrange. So of course they've got to use what's her name as with Hermione's voice, and she does such a good job of being Hermione trying to pretend to be her that I still have to look twice to convince myself that it's not actually Emma Watson in a disguise.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
That's good acting.
I really
10 points to Slytherin.
Just because I don't know if we'll get back to that character again as we're talking. I have to kind of just footnote that I really enjoyed that it was Mrs. Weasley who kills her.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
That is such a great moment, and that actually brings me to one of the big ha's I was going to raise about this movie.
Hey, fantastic!
Oh.
Just call me Captain Segway.
Captain Segway.
Go ahead.
That's almost as good as Log In.
Captain Log In.
The Avada Kedavra curse is set up and explained to us right from the beginning when we first learn about it in book and movie 4 as killing a person but leaving them absolutely unmarked. And their body is just there. We first see it in the book in the prologue to book 4 when we are treated to a Muggle world's perspective on the murder of the Riddle family, which we later find out was done by Voldemort, who was killing his parents. But those people were found.
Of him.
Oh yeah, sort of Oedipus plus. But they're found dead with not a single mark on them, nothing physically wrong with them. The medical examiner unable to find any reason for them not to be perfectly healthy, apart from the fact that they're dead.
Dead, right.
And this is how Avada Kedavra is said to work in the books, and how we see it working in the first movie or so. People drop and crumple where they stand. And then we start to mess with that in number 6, although this is in the book as well, when we see Snape, a.k.a. Professor Dumbledore, and it doesn't just drop him and he crumples, it blasts him into the sky and then he falls off the tower like a good Disney death. But then we have these kills...
Well, he has to die in slow motion. He's one of our favorite characters, so he's,
But in 7 we get a lot of these. In 7, Voldemort is, again in the book, explicitly said to have died from the Avada Kedavra curse that he threw at Harry, because, as usual, it bounces right off and hits him. Happens a lot. If you were Voldemort and that kept happening to you, would you not stop using that spell?
Yeah, I'd go to something else.
Yeah, but...
I would just stick my snake on people.
But... Well,
he does that too.
You can't have the villains be too smart, or we'd never defeat them. Voldemort in the book explicitly dies because of that, and therefore he dies the way you die if you get AK'd, which is you're dead and you drop where you stood, and then your body is lying there. In the book, the characters who see him observe that the dead body of Voldemort looks very ordinary. Looks like just anybody dead.
What do they do with it?
And
in the book,
I don't exactly remember.
Okay.
I think he's actually shuffled off and buried.
That just seems like something that she would probably deal with. Is what do you do with the body of a crazy mass murderer?
Yeah, I think she does address that, but I don't remember offhand exactly how.
But here doesn't he crumple into stone?
We get this Here we get this amazing visual effect where flakes of him fly off into the sky until there's nothing left.
Right.
Which is cool, but...
Needed to be a different curse
departure.
If that was the case, because that's not what that does.
Yeah. Comparatively, when Molly is dueling Helena Bonham Carter, and Molly Weasley finally does throw a kill shot at her, the green flash and the look of it sure looks like an Avada Kedavra to me, and yet she freezes solid, and then Molly throws a second curse which shatters her into splinterines or smithers or something, and that's how she dies. And great, she dies. We love seeing her die because she's a horrible, horrible person. The character, not the actress. I don't know about the actress. She might be worse. But it's a common fallacy to fall into, to confuse actors and actresses with the characters they play.
It totally is, yeah.
And many of our favorite actors are on record commenting how annoyed they get.
Oh yeah, well, especially when
Alan Rickman, for example,
especially
really hates it when people walk up to him and say, "Hi, Professor Snape." He hates that. He said so.
Oh, has he said that?
Yeah,
that's funny.
If you ever want to annoy Alan Rickman, if you get to meet him, so I'm told,
just go say that to him.
You know, ask him why he's always evil. Because he's really, really good at it.
Well, same thing with Helena Bonham
Carter.
Carter. Yeah, she always plays crazy. Well, not always, but she often plays crazy people. Yeah.
She's actually been in some stuff where she plays non-insane, non-psychopathic.
That's true.
Non-flesh-crawlingly creepy people.
She's really good in Fight Club. She's
kind
of crazy in Fight Club too.
Thing is, I only know it's her when I check the credits. But you know, that's what acting's about. It's a craft, and you can be very good at it. These people all are.
Were you going to make another point about the? Were you going to make another AK point? Because it seemed like you were on your way to a final resolution of that point.
Well, I was trying to get 47 of them, but
oh, okay.
I don't think that's going to work out.
Okay. Well, can we go on to Snape then, since we brought up Snape? Can we talk about him a little bit?
Severus Snape.
So you said earlier that in the book there's a lot of points made about what kind of person Harry Potter is and in how he treats people that have done terrible things to him. And I think that the one that really gets right, well, I mean, not that it doesn't others, but where we see that the most, I think, really is. At the very end with Snape, and the fact that his kid's middle name is Severus, and he makes a big deal out of how he says Severus Snape was the bravest man that he knew, and ultimately when he learned the reason that he killed Dumbledore and all of that all makes sense. But Snape was still terrible to Harry Potter.
Yes,
all the freaking time.
He was as nasty as he could figure out how to be. And here again, as usual, my general refrain, well, in the book, just because in the book that pensive scene where Harry gets to see Snape's memories finally learn, no, it's not in that. It's when he's talking to Dumbledore in King's Cross and discussing Snape with Dumbledore then, and Dumbledore says, "Can you imagine what it must have been like for him to see the eyes of the woman he loved staring out of the face of the man he hated?"
Yeah, that's a great point. Which makes it really interesting that that's what he says when he dies.
Yeah. I mean,
because it's hard to know how to take that once you know that.
Exactly.
Once Snape, when he dies, when Harry Potter has this or later when he has this information, but he dies and says you have your mother's eyes, and then later he finds out why he said that. In that context, what does that mean? Yeah. And I love that. It's because it's like is that to Snape at that moment, is that a positive thing? Is that a negative thing? I don't know.
Well, that's the only time Snape addresses Harry ever and likens him to his mother.
Right.
All the way along, Snape is always treating Harry as the son of his father. And this one last moment, when Snape is dying, he addresses Harry as his mother's son. And we finally get to see the love that Snape had for Lily Potter that has been driving him and tormenting him through all of these years, both in the book and the movie, this is such an impacting thing. It may be more impacting to me than the death of Dobby the house elf, or the death of one of the Weasley twins. I can never remember which, or if it matters, or Remus Lupin and Tonks dying just after the birth of their baby, which is hinted at in the movie, but it's not made very clear.
Okay, that would explain why I didn't know what you were talking about, because I thought I was paying attention.
Yeah, that to get to know Snape's pain that way, and to finally see why he is the awful, nasty, unpleasant person that he is, and he is an awful, nasty, unpleasant person, a nasty piece of work, Rowling calls him, and hard to disagree with that. But I found those flashbacks really impacting. That is a thing that I wish they had given themselves a little bit more time with than they did. There are some other things that they drew out relative to the book, such as Harry's final duel with Voldemort, which in the movie is, a scene. They chase each other all the way around the school and all this thing. No.
I'm not going to begrudge it that, though.
It was a nice sequence. It's got some great
not,
effects in it.
because
It's awesome.
And you also got to look at it from the perspective of the filmmakers. This is the big climax between the hero and the villain after 8 freaking movies. You got to have that. I think you got to have that.
They must have thought so as well, because they did so.
Yeah, I just think it's important to always remember that as much as you'd like the movies to be as close to the books as you can, they are two different mediums, and action doesn't work in a book like it does in a movie. So your author is making choices in the narrative somewhat based on the medium itself. You don't write drawn out action sequences in books. They're not fun to read. That's not what they're for. A lot of those are done. A lot of those are done in the background, if you'll notice, whenever they have them. And
they're not very interesting to write either.
No, they're not. But they can be fun to look at, and not just fun, but visually, in a film or a TV show or any other kind of video visual medium, you can do a lot of storytelling with an action scene. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily there was a great deal of storytelling being done with this action scene. I'm just saying that I completely understand why they thought that an audience was going to want to see a little bit of action there. And honestly, it wasn't real long.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as it could have been.
It wasn't the drawn out lightsaber duels in the new Star Wars trilogy. It wasn't those.
Fair enough.
It also wasn't the imaginative scene that we got at the end of 5.
Yeah. I mean, if there's going to be an action scene, there's a good model.
But I do feel the need to take up for it a little bit for doing that. But that's just me.
I don't. That stuff bores the crumb out of me, honestly.
It wasn't bad.
And
now, it did get made fun of a lot for just being a couple of guys with sticks shooting lights at each other. I mean, it did get made fun of for that.
In some ways, as far as a magical duel goes, there's not near the inventiveness with spells as we saw between Dumbledore and Voldemort at the end of number 5. But in a way, it wasn't going to be. It's a different sort of confrontation between Harry and Voldemort.
Yeah. Well, it really is just might against might at that point. It's just, I want you to die, I want you to die. Which one of us is stronger?
And that is the change that was made. Because, again, Harry goes to the forest in the book and just stands there and lets Voldemort murder him, and thereby destroy the Horcrux, and you know how that all goes. Then he lets everyone continue to think he's dead until the opportune time when Voldemort is gloating in the courtyard and takes some time out to humiliate Neville, which was a bad idea on Voldemort's part, as that's how Neville ends up with the sword, which he can then use to kill the snake. Way to go, Voldemort. Nice, smooth move.
I really like...
But at that point, when Harry finally comes to, there's no long run around every place.
Yeah.
It is, as it was in the beginning, Avada Kedavra versus Expelliarmus.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And
all right.
That is the only spell Harry ever throws at Voldemort in the entire arc, with the possible exception of the thing at during the flight from Little Whinging at the beginning of 7, where the wand does something by itself, apparently. Harry is always attacking to disarm. Evil is always attacking to kill. That's thematic. That's one of the points of the character, of the series, of the novel. It's one of the ways we're allowed to see that Harry and Voldemort are not just opposite sides of the same coin, that opposing sides of the same battle are not equivalent, that there really is a difference between who good is and what good is doing and how good operates and evil. And we lose a little bit of that when we give Harry the action hero kind of sequence.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That's
much so, nice though it is visually, and the interesting bit where we see them grappling with each other while in disapparition soaring around black smoke mode. I don't know exactly what to make of what I'm seeing in that.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I wondered about that too. Well, hey, don't get me wrong. I don't want to lose the point of the story over a fun action scene. That's not what I'm saying at all. And didn't realize that potentially that's what it's doing. So. I didn't realize that in the books Harry only ever attacked Voldemort to disarm. Yeah. Which also, let's talk about that because I had some questions about this. That might help the whole thing about all the talk about disarming wands and who they belong to after disarming, because I never got the sense watching the movies that disarming a person meant you owned their wand after that.
Well, usually, yeah, because usually up to this point, when we've seen someone hit with Expelliarmus, they later pick their wand back up.
Right.
And and I guess, if they do that, they get to keep it. The case where this mattered the most is with the Elder Wand, because somehow or other, the super-duper wand's allegiance to its holder or not is an even bigger deal. We see a little bit of that as Harry tries out other people's wands after his has been broken. Some of them, we see more of this in the book, some of them are really frustrating to him and don't seem to work for him at all.
I was wondering while watching the movie if maybe that's the way it was in the book, because I remembered from reading some of the earlier ones that, especially like when he goes into Ollivanders in the first place. Well, that's in the movie too. In the first movie, that different wands don't react to him like other ones, and he can't even pick some of them up. So
the wand chooses the wizard.
So when you get to this,
always been said.
He uses Malfoy's. Doesn't seem to have any problem with that. In fact, he even says that Malfoy's likes him better. No, it's Ollivander who says the allegiance has changed, right?
It's explained better in the book because in a book you have time to explain things.
Yeah.
That if you apparently the wand chooses the wizard, and if the wizard a wand has chosen gets beat by another wizard, a wand will, in many cases, choose to serve the winner as a more interesting wizard. That wands are somehow attracted to power in some strange way.
I see. Okay.
So that the issue of wand allegiance, which is the key to one of the keys to what happens with Voldemort at the end, in the ending sequence, is the foundation is better laid in the book.
And then the Elder Wand just works a little bit differently.
Yeah, and the Elder Wand is
because
an
it
even
seems to
bigger
have
deal.
A set of like just a set of rules. Like because they make a really big deal out of that at the end. Whose was it when this person died, and yeah.
One of the things I liked about that as a story issue was that we find out by the end that the allegiance of the Elder Wand, or the Death Stick, went not with the killing, but just with the confrontation in the first place.
Right.
The wand aligned itself with Draco for disarming Dumbledore rather than with Snape for murdering him. The bad guys in this story are always still assuming that it's all about killing people. That it's always about killing your enemies and conquering them with force. And I think it's kind of cool that they find out in the end that, no, not necessarily about that. That even disarming mattered. Harry's disarming rather than killing is actually a plot point in that first fight in the book. In the book, that is how the Death Eaters figure out which of the Polyjuice Harrys is the real Harry.
Oh, okay.
Because Harry, the Death Eater attacking Harry and Hagrid included Stan Shunpike being controlled by the Imperius Curse. Stan Shunpike, who was the geeky, pimply bus driver in Volume 3.
Okay.
And who is almost nobody believes is truly a Death Eater, but he's being controlled. Harry doesn't want to kill him because Harry knows it's not his fault. So Harry casts Disarm on him, and the minute he does that, the other Death Eaters immediately jump and say, "This is the real one!" Because Harry's the person who would do that rather than throw a kill at somebody who is attacking him in midair in the middle of the night with deadly force.
And he's got a pattern of that behavior, so people are used to it.
And that's a plot point, and it's a character point, and you always hate to lose those.
I had one more big question just about things I thought were made a bit ambiguous in the movie, and you've probably got some more points you want to get to. But this is really the last big thing I wanted to talk about and ask you about. In the theater, when I first saw this, I remember thinking that why Harry Potter doesn't die the first time and is able to come back from talking with Dumbledore. I thought that was left really ambiguous.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks he's dead. He's apparently he apparently looks dead enough that everybody thinks he's dead. And they carry him all the way back to the school, and everybody thinks he's dead. And then he's able to just wake back up. And I had to kind of piece it together myself, and never really entirely even knew. I always assumed that it had something to do with the fact that he was a Horcrux, but
that's one part of it.
Okay.
The other part of it is this.
But am I right that it's left ambiguous in the book? That it really does feel like somewhat of a Neo-Matrix thing, where it's just like, well, he came back because he's the one.
No, it's clearer in the book.
Well, I'm sure it's clear in the book. I'm just saying that. Would you agree that it's not that clear in the film?
Yeah, it is left a bit loose in the film. She explains in the book, and this seed is also laid quite a ways back. It goes back to book number 4.
Okay.
Harry survives Voldemort's first attack when he's a baby because of his mother's blood sacrifice. His mother's blood is the big deal. Dumbledore is able to protect him at his aunt and uncle's house because his aunt shares his mother's blood. Mother's blood and the blood sacrifice. A big deal, magically speaking. Well, when Voldemort, as Professor Quirrell, tries to attack Harry at the end of book 1, Quirrell crumbles into crud on touching Harry because of the power of Lily's blood sacrifice and her love protecting Harry, and that's something that him being so corrupt and evil cannot even touch. However, book 4, when Voldemort makes a new body for himself, thanks to a helping hand from Wormtail. He uses, part of the spell involves the blood of an enemy, and he chooses Harry's blood for that, because then Harry's blood, Harry's mother's blood, Lily's blood, and Lily's blood sacrifice will be in Voldemort's veins as well.
Oh, and so now he'll be immune to that.
So now,
or at least
and
to
first
agree.
we see that Voldemort is no longer unable to touch Harry because of that. However, the flip side of that is that because Voldemort has got Harry's blood in him, that also interferes even more with Voldemort's attempts to kill Harry all the way through Book 7.
Wow, okay.
It's not only you got the twin wand problem with the Phoenix Feather cores, and you got the blood tie between them, and you got the Horcrux tie between them. All of those things that Voldemort has done, being Mr. Evil, trying to make himself stronger and overcome Harry's protections, and they all turn out to be things that defeat his attempts to kill Harry. Finally, when Harry walks into the forest to let himself be killed, he does so explicitly, sacrificing his life to save the lives of everybody up at the school. Because Voldemort has made it clear that Harry must be given to him or else he will kill everybody. So Harry goes down to the forest and sacrifices his life to save the lives of everybody else there.
That's not really clear in the
From that moment on,
yeah.
Everybody else at the school is protected by Harry's blood sacrifice, the way Harry was protected by his mother's at the very beginning of this entire series of events. And we don't get that in the movie, but it is, and that's why after that point all of Voldemort's spells just bounce off people. Nothing really works for him. The wand won't work for him, and he can't really do much harm to anybody at all because he has already been completely overpowered. And, by the way, the last of his Horcruxes is now going to get killed. Neville kills the snake, and now he's truly mortal again, and his own curse, yet again, is going to be what kills him.
So how does... What I'm confused about then is, and this is somewhat convoluted, but what I'm confused about is then if Voldemort can't kill Harry Potter at all, ever, then how does the Horcrux go away? Because Dumbledore makes a really big deal in the Snape flashback about how Harry has to die because he's a Horcrux, and we can't get rid of Voldemort unless we kill Harry. Was what I got from that. So why do we lose the Horcrux if we don't lose Harry?
The soul fragment in Harry, which is what makes him a Horcrux, is destroyed by the killing curse that Voldemort throws on him when he goes down to the forest. It can't kill Harry himself because of all this other stuff, but that results in the soul fragment dying, and we see, and the shriveled up, mangled baby awful thing that we see in the King's Cross scene. That's, if I understand the movie correctly, that's the soul fragment which has been living in Harry all this time and given him parcel tongue and given him this sort of radio channel into Voldemort's mind.
And is it
that's the soul fragment?
It looks like that because it just got
it just got blasted.
Okay.
It also looks like that because it's lived a life of evil and hatred and misery. It's part of Voldemort, and if apparently the message is if you live a life of hatred and evil and misery and murder, that's what your soul ends up looking like. Shriveled and nasty and bloody and raw and ugly and horrible.
Well, then why
so
doesn't...
kids, don't be evil. It's bad.
Why doesn't Dumbledore know that Harry will survive this then?
I think he does.
I figured that would be your answer.
I think it's at least a possibility
yeah,
that in fact he
definitely
did.
A possibility.
and he just does not tell anybody.
Well, he clearly...
Understandable reasons.
He doesn't just not tell anyone. He clearly keeps it from Snape if he knows that, because he tells Snape point blank, Harry Potter's got to die.
And he tells Snape this because Snape is going to have
Snape
to tell Harry
doesn't
this
want to
in one way or another.
And Snape doesn't want that to happen because Dumbledore looks at him and is kind of seems to be somewhat even surprised by the look on his face and says and says something along the lines of, "I didn't even think that you cared about him."
Yeah. Dumbledore tells Snape this at the same breath as instructing Snape that at some point Snape needs to reveal this information to Harry, which happens by way of his dying tears and the pensieve and stuff.
Right.
So, but Harry has to walk into the forest not knowing,
because it needs to be an actual sacrifice. And if he's gonna come, and if he knows he's gonna come back, then it's not a sack. Okay, well, that makes sense to me.
The legend of the Deathly Hallows is that whoever unites the cloak, the Death Stick, and the Resurrection Stone will be the master of death by gaining powerful things. Harry becomes the master of death by accepting death and walking up to face it like a man for the sake of the people he loves.
And let me be fair, that is clear enough in the movie. I just couldn't quite piece all of it together. Mostly just because I was kind of confused about the Horcrux thing.
Yeah.
And whether or not Dumbledore, because it seems like Dumbledore would understand that.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like it seemed like he kind of knew why. I mean, I'm just guessing, but it always seemed to me like he kind of knew why Harry Potter survived the attack when he was a baby in the first place. So it seems like he would be able to piece all that together because he would get the whole blood business.
Dumbledore is the king of knowing way more than he says.
Yeah. And
never saying everything he knows. And that's canon.
Well, that explains that for me. We're about an hour in. What other things, briefly, did you want to bring up that we haven't talked about yet?
There were scenes in here that I really didn't understand why we needed.
Like the dance thing?
Dancing in the tent would have to top that list. I guess it's supposed to be Harry attempting to cheer Hermione up after Ron has stormed off and left them. But with so much effort and pains taken by Harry throughout the last 3 or 4 of the books to insist to the world that no, he and Hermione are not the item, they're just really good friends, and Ron and Hermione are going to be the couple. We've known this since book 4. We've been banged over the head about this.
Though, as odd and awkward as that scene was, and I agree with you, I still found it entirely platonic. I didn't get the sense that they or the audience was supposed to get the sense that there was an actual love triangle forming.
I think we were supposed to get the friendiness of that.
I just thought that was a
bizarre way to try to show friendiness. That would not be my first choice. And the song has nothing to do with anything. And I guess not that it had to have to do with something else, except I kept listening to it, thinking, well, maybe I'll hear maybe there's something in the lyrics of this that will make it sense out of it. Oh yeah, I see why they chose that for this scene.
Now you know how I felt 100 different times watching Smallville. Anyway.
Yeah,
that's the trouble you run with trying to use popular music in a scene.
Yeah, it reminded me of the montage scenes that I've seen in so many TV shows, where they'll have a song there, and maybe like House did this every episode, Cold Case does this every episode, and some of the shows do. It's their pat way of tying up everything and resolving all the issues, and about 1 time out of 4, the song actually makes some kind of sense. And the rest of the time, I'm just sitting there listening. Okay, why this?
When you started talking about about song montages like that, I don't know why, but the first thing that jumped in my head was, "Can you picture that?"
Can you picture that?
From the Muppet movie. Sorry.
Which, compared to this one, makes sense.
Yeah, that's also a musical.
Yeah, I found the dancing in the tent thing a little distracting, and the song also a very out of the world taking thing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Because it's in conflict with the soundtrack of everything else that's gone on in the movie. It's in conflict with every other stitch of music that this movie has had, or that, part 1 or part 2.
Well, that's not such a big
Even
deal
part
considering
6.
the fact that it was. Yeah, but we talked about some music things in this franchise. I mean, like, at least I mean, they're listening to the radio. It's a song that's playing while they're. I just didn't like the selection. I thought it was strange, but anyway.
Yeah, I didn't hate it as a song. I didn't love it either, but that made a scene that really I wondered about. The presence of the ministers of magic that we get in this cycle, Rufus S., whose name I still wonder how to pronounce. Although, actually, I think Hermione does actually mention his name one time.
I don't remember.
And it goes by very quickly, but I had always been hoping, ever since reading book 6, which is where he is first introduced in the book series. Another really interesting character that unfortunately kind of gets pushed to the margin, and he is an interesting and important character in the 6th book. Does not appear at all in movie number 6, but we see him for this opening scene at the beginning of the 7th movie, and he's all, "Your ministry will remain strong," and even with a quivering shakingness that represents extra personal intensity. Interesting actor. And then he's replaced by the Death Eater doofus, Pious Thickness. His name is Pious Thickness.
I draw the line at Pious Thickness.
Way to name a character to tell us exactly what you think of them.
If they went to Hogwarts?
Perhaps you've met my cousin, Barney von Scumbucket.
What house do you think the Thicknesses were in if they went to Hogwarts, right?
Yeah.
Thickness. I mean, Snape was funny enough, but when you read the first book and you realize that it's going to be that kind of a book, where the names are going to border on comic book. But when you get to Pious Thickness,
and he is both pious and thick in the film. Well played. Interestingly, the film makes it look like he really is a Death Eater all along, whereas in the books it's more suggested that he is under control of the Imperious Curse.
Oh, okay.
And while actually is still kind of a dork, and probably not on the side of goodness and light anyhow, but not a Death Eater with the evil and the tattoo and everything. But well played, both of them. Wish I'd seen more of Rufus, who will not be named. The guy, the successor to Cornelius Fudge, because his conflict with Harry in book 6, and then in book 7, in the scene where he's reading the will, is with some really nice stuff, and another really good principles versus realpolitik dichotomy that's very well written, and once again helps us know what side we're on in the story. Not that there's any wonder about that. They took the trouble to show in the film, Lavender Brown dead, which I thought was an interesting choice. I mean, there are students that we see dead, but the one that I actually recognized, and she gets a light shown on her, so they're making sure that we see her, Lavender Brown, Ron's girlfriend from number 6.
Oh, okay, okay. I just couldn't remember who you were talking about. Yeah.
Lav.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of an odd choice, isn't it?
But I'm not sure whether she's explicitly killed in that battle in the book, or whether we just see her injured. It's kind of left open, I think.
You know who I was waiting to see get killed? The girl that calls all the Quidditch games.
Oh yeah.
I really kind of thought maybe she would be one of the one, or at least that we'd see her in the battle, because that's a character that you told me was just kind of made up for the movies, and or at least I think was right. No, is that actually a character?
His name is Lee Jordan.
It's a he?
Yes.
I thought it was a girl.
Well, he got the dreadlocks going, and he's the same year as Fred and George.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't see him in the movies anymore after he gets old enough for his voice to have changed.
That's weird though, because in the movies, I always thought that it always looked like a girl to me. That actor, weird. All right, I wonder if I'm the only one that had that.
I haven't heard anybody else suggest that.
Well, I'm not going to allow myself to be embarrassed by this, because I always thought that it always looked like a girl to me. So
I've never heard anybody else suggest that, but I've never heard anybody else talk about it. So.
Wow, I wish I hadn't said that now.
That's all right. We still love you.
Whatever. Anyway.
And I don't think it affects the character all that much.
I wish that person had been there.
Yeah, it was nice to see that more of that one. People we thought we would see in the battle. Well, they really got everybody in. They got Slughorn in. I'm glad they called Richard.
I was glad he was there too.
Back for this movie. It would have been so easy for them not to write it in such a way where they could have not bothered, but they went to the trouble to have him back and show him fighting the battle, and on the good guy's side, it must be said, despite being the head of Slytherin. So they're not all bad, it turns out. Good for you, Slughorn.
They could have almost gotten away with not having, what's her name, from 5, the evil lady from 5.
Oh, Umbridge.
Yeah, Umbridge. They almost could have gotten away with not even having Umbridge, and I'm glad she was there.
Yeah. I'm glad she was there.
Now, that was, of course, much more of a plot point, but, I mean, they could have written it out, but, I thought that was great. And that they managed to tie it back into 5 and have Harry one more time say we must not tell lies, and I don't know. I loved all that.
Yeah. Harry's I must not tell lies salute is one of my favorite acts of defiance that he ever has.
Oh yeah.
And in the book he uses it. He gives that 2 or 3 times to Rufus S.
Yeah.
As well as one last shot at Umbridge in book 7. Which is gratifying considering how horrible a thing that was in book 5 when that was being done to him.
It was, yeah.
Well, and
she gets her comeuppance so hard in 5 that it's kind of twisted and hurts, as a viewer to watch her doing even scarier things. Like she's because the world has changed with Voldemort, she's in a position where she can even do a lot more damage, because now she's not just in the school.
Yeah.
She's the I think her office door says something like Undersecretary to the Minister. Yeah.
Well, she was that before as well.
Oh, okay.
But it's just that with the Death Eaters in charge.
Yeah, and I knew that, but it's scarier with the Death Eaters in charge. Exactly.
She's got even more free reign to be her evil self. The implication is strong from the books that she's not actually a Death Eater. She's not actually a loyal follower of Voldemort or anything. She's just a really horrible person.
Yeah.
And the Death Eaters regime is right up her alley.
Well, she totally strikes me as the kind of character, and I think that this is consistent with her all the way through, that she's the kind of character that just kind of goes wherever the wind goes.
Yes. And she's an opportunist. She's a classic Slytherin by all of the definitions given in the first few books.
Did she go to Hogwarts?
It's not stated.
Okay.
I assume she would
I was just curious, yeah. Well, you can't assume that with everybody, because we know there's other schools.
Yeah. I mean,
but I guess they're...
None of the others are in Britain that have been referenced that I'm aware of. So.
Right.
it seems likely that the odds are good that she went to Hogwarts.
Well, here's a stupid question. That's just this really broad thing that I just thought of. But like, okay, is the Ministry of Magic the ministry for the entire magical world, or just Britain?
I think it's just Britain.
All right.
Because I don't know anything in the books to get that from. I mean, in the movies to get that from, but some of the office talk we hear from Weasley Senior at the beginning of book 4, they talk about international negotiations and various things, make it sound a lot like each country has its own magical government, parallel to the Muggle government.
I was just curious. Yeah.
The difference being that there's just the one Minister of Magic, and he's comparable not to any of the other cabinet ministers in the actual British government, but to the PM himself. We're never told whether the Minister of Magic reports directly to the Queen.
That would be hilarious.
That would.
But it also wouldn't make a lot of sense because the Queen would be a Muggle.
Right, and what would she?
Well, perhaps not. Perhaps, who knows? Yeah, perhaps
we don't
not.
Really know that, do we?
See,
we wouldn't.
Because of kind of the microcosm of this is a movie, primarily about British characters. It always kind of feels to me like the magical world is smaller than the real world, but you don't really know that. And I think, and I'm really glad that we had 4. That 4 told us, okay, there are other schools, and this world is bigger than we thought it was. Yeah. In
the Quidditch scene at the beginning of book 4, we see groups of wizards from America, from Africa, from Australia, from all over the place.
So that gives you the sense that the whole world has a magical world behind the Muggle world that nobody knows about.
There's a Salem Witches Institute, for example, in Massachusetts.
That's hilarious. By the way, speaking of that, I don't mean to belabor the Umbridge thing, but I really liked the scene with her where she's about to basically lop off somebody's head for not being a witch.
Yes,
I like that. That's cool.
Yes, and that's some lovely
fantastic irony
from Rowling's point. I really like the tracts and pamphlets that Harry finds in her desk in the movie.
Oh yeah!
When Muggles
attack! Sounds like a crappy B
movie.
Yeah,
priceless.
That was great,
and captures the nature of that kind of propaganda so perfectly. You think of the actual propaganda that films that the Nazis put out about the Jews, and I'm thinking that's an intentional callback on Rowling's part.
Well, we've already compared Voldemort to Hitler in earlier videos.
Yeah. Because, honestly.
Well, sure. Yeah.
And I remember being surprised when I first read the books, just how much Voldemort's regime was about rounding up all the Muggles and simply burning them or frying them or killing them off or enslaving them like meat. At first I thought that it was just going to be a matter of subjugating the Muggle government or something.
Mm-hmm.
And for his program to turn out so very extreme, I was not expecting. But in retrospect, it does seem to suit him. And
well, especially when you finally see what his government looks like.
Yes.
And I'm really glad that we got to delve into that. That's probably my favorite thing about this is that about 7 about 7 is that it goes that far.
Yeah, and we get to see.
It's not just we've got to stop the supervillain from taking power. No, he takes power.
Yes.
He's in charge for a while.
And it's not what we think he's gonna do. It's
this is what he's doing.
This is what he's doing.
And you get this kind of looming ambiance of maybe it's too late, which is fantastic because you want the conflict to feel at this point in the series that severe, And
enough conversations between characters.
Oh, about how scary
really
he
feel,
is, yeah.
And between characters who honestly believe that it's over and we've lost and there's nothing else anyone can do.
There's nothing we can do, yeah.
And the
including Dumbledore's brother.
Right, Aberforth sums it up perfectly. And the few who insist on fighting on in spite of that, the great example of which would have to be Neville.
Mm-hmm.
And his speech at the end, when they think Harry Potter has been killed, and Neville says, "We're still going to fight you."
Well, what I love is he starts walking up to Voldemort, and Voldemort just dismisses him out of hand and just says, "Well, I guess we'll find something for you to do," because he thinks that he's walking up to join him because he opens it up for people to join him. And then somebody behind Neville says, "Don't, you're gonna die," and he just stops and says, "People die all the time."
Yes.
And that's such a cool way to start a speech like that.
Yes.
That's how he opens
people die every day.
Including
people we love, friends, family.
And here's an example right in front of us.
And that doesn't change what's right and what's wrong and what we must do if we believe in what's right.
I'm also really glad that Neville doesn't come off by the end of this, and even in the film series, where you do see him grow over films, despite the fact that he's mostly in the background, and that he starts off as just kind of the goofy kid that can't do anything right. In the second movie, he's got that line where he says, "Why is it always me?"
Yeah.
I think it's the second movie, and that kind of thing. But I'm glad that he doesn't just go from that to suddenly, because it's clever and cute. At the very end, he gets the big speech and he gets to save the day abruptly. It's not abrupt, and that's really good. It's not Wesley Crusher saves the Enterprise, and you had that with. I compared this once to The Matrix earlier. That was something I was thinking in the theater. I was afraid of that. You had that with Matrix Revolutions, where it really was like Wesley Crusher saves the Enterprise. There's this kid who fumbles around for 2 movies, and he's kind of a doofus, and we don't really like him. And then, of course, because it's cute and clever at the end, he's got to save everybody. I didn't get that with Neville.
I watched about 3 minutes of that movie.
But we don't really get that with Neville.
Neville we get to see grow into who he will become. There's a lovely kind of what if-iverse thing thrown into the books, because the initial prophecy that launches Voldemort's attack on the Potters in the first place specifies that the one who will have power to defeat the Dark Lord will be born as the month of July is ending. He will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, and all of that you can read in the book. But Dumbledore reveals to Harry, I think it's in book 5, there was actually another boy born at the end of July that year whose parents had defied Voldemort 3 times, and who would also potentially meet all the terms of the prophecy.
Wow.
And that boy...
And was that Neville?
Is Neville Longbottom.
Wow, that's really cool.
Harry says, well, then maybe it's not me, maybe it's Neville. And Dumbledore says, no, you're forgetting the other part. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. When Voldemort chose Harry rather than Neville to attack and try to murder, Voldemort chose which of those 2 boys was going to be his arch nemesis and would actually defeat him.
And that's a really nice bit of irony then at the end, even though we don't get all of that in the movies, that it's Neville that kills the snake, and that at the same time you've got Voldemort going, you're just some stupid little limping kid.
And it turns out that Neville turns out to have in him an awful lot of greatness that was much unsuspected all of his life, and in his last years at Hogwarts, he becomes awfully heroic.
Well, and he
honestly
ends up being as proactive as Harry Potter really throughout the whole thing. I think that it's interesting that those characters parallel each other as well as they do.
Yeah, and Neville, the pureblood, raised in the pure magic world, and in the first book or so, we're told that Neville actually did not show any signs of having magic at all until pretty late and his family were worried that he was going to turn out to be a squib with a person born to a magical family who has no magic. In the last minute, he finally gets in. The exchange in book 2...
which probably explains why he has such a tough time doing the spells.
Yeah. In book 2, when Harry and Ron and Draco and the goons have had their fight, and Draco calls Hermione Mudblood, and they all go down to Hagrid's cabin afterwards and find out what that word means. And one of the points that is made in that conversation is that Hermione, though a Muggle-born wizard, is one of the smartest and most powerful and best students in the class, and Neville, who's a pureblood, can barely stand a cauldron right side up.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, at that stage, that is where Neville is.
And we start getting the sense that that doesn't really mean anything necessarily.
But still, Neville is the alternative chosen one, growing into this heroic figure by the end. This very active and extremely brave fellow is so good to see. Another pitfall that the hero's journey stories can be vulnerable to is creating a hero who's heroic and everybody else being complete nebbish around him.
Mm-hmm.
And here we get to see a lot of people be heroic.
And also sometimes that's done in order to make the hero who's actually not that impressive appear to be more impressive than he is.
It's the same reason that so many villains are really stupid. To make the hero look smarter by comparison. Another pitfall that is mostly avoided in the Potter series. Nice job.
Well, Geoff, I imagine we could probably do this for another half hour, but we are
extremely likely.
We are well out of time, and probably nearly out.
Too long. Didn't watch.
Probably nearly out of well, it's not tape anymore, is it? But anyway, so
bits.
I guess that's it. Unless there's any other big thing that we forgot to mention that you want to throw out real quick.
I think we have covered all of the important pitfalls and dangers of when Muggles attack.
Well, Geoff, thanks a whole lot for joining me for this epic 7-part series.
It has been totally epic.
I hope people really enjoyed it, and I'd love to have you back to do something like this again sometime down the road.
We will.
Don't know what on yet, but
tune in next time.
But this was absolutely a lot of fun. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching Harry Potter Discussions. I hope you enjoyed it.
Living through this hall with us.
And I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm